When the chill from Canada comes tearing south, over empty fields up to your doorstep to kiss you on the mouth. I will keep you warm, I'll keep the fire burning, keep you dry in the storm. When winter is returning true to form, I will keep you warm. And you say you're insulated pretty tight, but the flickering of your candle has revealed you in a slightly different light. I will keep you warm, I'll keep the fire burning, keep you dry in the storm. When winter is returning true to form, I will keep you warm.
I want to welcome Paul Kaplan to Mostly Folk today and introduce him to the folks here on Catskills Air. And Paul it doesn't have a new album out. Here's the neat part about this. Paul is reintroducing an album that he recorded many years ago. This is the album for the folks watching on Catskills Air. And the name of this album is King of Hearts. And as I said, Paul is reintroducing this album to the folk music community with it's really a good idea that he's doing this because it's a really fine album. And it was introduced when did this album first come out, Paul?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Artie.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm excited to be here. This was recorded live in 1985 at the Speakeasy Musicians Cooperative in Greenwich Village, of which I was a founding member. And I had a backup band, and we did it twice, and then we mixed it all together and put out an LP. And so I still sing a lot of the songs from this album. They're some of my audience favorites. So I really thought I should find a way to get this out with newer technology, newer being CD, but also download, so that people could be aware of it at this time. I think it's just as relevant as when I put it out. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this album is all live. And tell me about it. First, well, why don't we begin by just talking about yourself and where you came from, how you got into folk music, why? Did you do anything else before that? Were you employed elsewhere? Tell me about your background.
Okay. Well, I'm a red diaper baby. My parents had a lot of folk music in the house, and they had those old I think it was disc albums by Mo Ash before Folkways. The Almanac Singers, I heard that growing up. I heard Pete Seeger, I heard Joan Baez. I have two older sisters who are really into folk music, so they've got all these LPs. Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, and the New Lost City Ramblers, Dylan and Jack Elliott. And I heard all this growing up, and it really stuck with me. And when I was a teenager, I started playing guitar and learning all those songs that I had been hearing all those years, and started writing songs right away. And in fact, there's a song I wrote in 1966, I think it was, called I've Been Told, that I took over to Broadside magazine, which was publishing topical songs, protest songs, and they loved it, put it in their magazine, and put me on a record in 1967 on Folkways. So I go way back with this, but the only other real job I had since then was teaching guitar in institutions and also privately, and eventually I got a certificate to teach music, elementary music in schools. I did that for almost 30 years, and I retired in 2021, and I've been trying to do more actual music since then. So that's maybe enough about me.
So where were you teaching?
Well, I was living in New York from 1968 to 88, and at the end there I was teaching in a public school with no real background in teaching in schools. And mostly I just sang with the kids, and that was in New York. But then I moved to Amherst, Massachusetts, which was very fortunate because there's a major institute. It's the flagship school of the University of Massachusetts right here in Amherst, and I was able to take courses and get a teaching degree in, I think it was 1994. And then I was teaching in different places. I spent 17 years north of here in Orange, Mass, and then 10 years in Springfield, Massachusetts. Yeah, so that was mostly where it was.
Neat. And then when you began to perform, you know, professionally out there with in the clubs, you started off in the clubs and singing by yourself, or did you go with a group?
Mostly by myself. I started out, there was a place around the corner. I lived in Chicago from 64 to 68. And the place around the corner it was a coffee house, with the espresso machine that would, and in between the song, you'd hear this loud, they were there to sell coffee, not to promote art. And I played there. That was my first gig, I guess. They gave me $2, and then I went out for the Summer of Love in San Francisco, and I got a job on Haight Street at the Haight Street Cafe. Those are my very, very early performances. And I played with some backup now and then. I also joined a band of doing English, Irish, and Scottish music in New York in 1978 called the Derby Ram, and we were the house band at the Eagle Tavern. Just to briefly talk about that, it was someone I met when I was in my senior year in college, at Hunter College. I met Dan Milner, who was a wonderful traditional singer, invited me to join this band, this trio with Larry Cole, the bagpiper, and he also had a contract to do a songbook, which songs of England, Ireland, and Scotland, the Bonnie Bunch of Roses, with 150 traditional songs that he asked me to transcribe for the book. So I transcribed all these 150 songs. I wrote the notes down in great detail, and for me it was a huge education between the book and then going every week to the Eagle Tavern, where we were the opening act for people like Martin Carthy, the Battlefield Band, and all the really big, a lot of the big touring bands from overseas, and also traditional singers from the States. And that put me sort of in the direction of traditional music, which has always affected my music, but and my songwriting, but even more so since those years and that experience, which was really eye-opening to me.
Well, when you were young, who were you listening to? Before you started performing.
Well, the people I mentioned, a lot of Bob Dylan and a lot of Phil Oakes, Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, Tom Paxton. Tom Paxton was a big influence, and I'm compared to him more than anybody else, which is a huge honor to be compared to Tom Paxton. And so those would be the Gene Ritchie, Doc Watson, people I really respected as Buffy St. Marie, Patrick Skye, a lot of the people who were on Broadside, which was the topical, as I mentioned, the Topical Song magazine, which I could talk more about later when it comes to, if we talk about Phil Oakes at all, because that was a big part of my life.
How did this album get the name King of Hearts, and tell me about the song itself?
Well, the song, it's based on a little bit of personal experience, and then expanded into a sort of an old style ballad of just a story song. And when I should talk, I've got to go back a ways to the early 80s when people were, or even in the 70s, people were meeting once a week at Greenwich Village at the Cornelia Street Cafe. And these were songwriters, and they would, the goal was to bring a new song every week. And people like Jack Hardy and David Massengill and Rod McDonald and a bunch of other local, really amazing, great songwriters were going there regularly, Brian Rose. And I joined that Monday night crowd, and we would go and sing our new songs and then go over to Folk City for the open mic and mingle and listen to each other, etc. But around the end of 1981, Angela Page, who I'm sure you know, she's a disc jockey, but she was married to Jack Hardy, and she found a falafel place on McDougal Street and talked them into opening it up for us musicians. And so she and Jack and a bunch of us founded this, mostly them, but I was one of the founding members, dues-paying members of the Musicians Cooperative. And you'd pay $2 a month and you could go 7 nights a week and your music would get in for free, which many of us took advantage of. And we'd listen to each other and play whenever we could and grow as performers. But Jack decided he wanted to get that music out into the world, so he had this crazy idea to put out an album every month of the local singers and their new songs, 12 songs, and stick a magazine in that and sell it for $2. And it was first called The Coop, based on the Co-op, and then it was the Fast Folk Musical Magazine. And he chose the songs and the singers, and the idea was to write good songs good enough to get on Fast Folk. So it was a real motivation for all of us. And I was fortunate enough that he chose King of Hearts for the very first issue. And he had Dave Van Ronk doing the Garden State Stomp, and he had Ed McCurdy doing Last Night I Had the Strangest Dream. Dave Massengill did On the Road to Fairfax County. It's quite an album. And of course, you can still get it on Smithsonian Folkways. You can get the entire Fast Folk collection, which went on for more than 10 years. And so that was the story of that song. And then when I decided, at that same time, I put out my first album, which was called Life on This Planet, an LP, which is not available in CD, but it is available for download at paulkaplanmusic.com, along with everything else. But I decided that some of the songs I wanted to put on my second album needed an audience. So I planned to do it live, and I thought, well, let's do it at Speakeasy. So we got the piano tuned up, and we advertised as a live album taping, which was, by the way, as far as I know, the only time that was ever done at Speakeasy. And a lot of people thought it couldn't be done, but we came in, we got a nice audience, and we gave them lyrics to some of the songs we wanted them to sing on, and we practiced, and then we recorded the whole thing twice. And I had a live band brought in. I had Kenny Kosek, who's I got him before he went off on tour with Jerry Garcia, and he was, I don't know if you know Kenny, but amazing violinist, played with John Denver and Willie Nelson, and my friend Robin Greenstein, who you probably know her music, and she did backup singing and banjo, and Larry Cole, the piper that I borrowed from I knew him from the Derby Ram with Dan Milner, and we had a great keyboardist named Ed Baker, and Mark Dan was the bass player. Mark Dan recorded all the early Fast Folk albums for years and years and years in his attic. And he played bass behind almost everyone. And as I've been listening to this, in preparation to put this out, I realized how these people just outdid themselves, and it just came out really, really well. It was to me a magical night, and maybe I'd say the highlight of my musical career so far. and then we went into the mixing room and spent a lot of time mixing it. It wasn't simple, but we sometimes put parts of one song together with another version because we'd done it twice. And luckily, without metronome, we still were able to match the tempo. And it was all, cutting and splicing tape.
The King of Hearts is a desperate card and the swiftest in the deck. He'll take your queen and neat and clean. He's a royal pain in the neck. He's a royal pain in the neck. My love and I were at the bar when the King of Hearts came in. He gave her a rose right under my nose, and my troubles did begin. My troubles did begin. With his red rose in her left hand, my love was hypnotized. He danced her out that swinging door right before my eyes, right before my eyes. I ran out into the road, but all that I could find was a golden band from her left hand that she had left behind, that she had left behind. For 3 long nights awake I watched, awaiting her return. For 3 long days I gazed and gazed until my eyes did burn, until my eyes did burn. For 3 long weeks I did not sleep, nor even eat a meal, while the bitter wind seemed to sing, you got a rotten deal, you got a rotten deal. For 3 long years I've shed no tears, nor tried to fix the blame. I played and lost and paid the cost of being in the game, of being in the game. But sometimes when I see a rose, I pick it where it stands. I marvel at the way it glows, and I crush it in my hands. I crush it in my hands. Oh, the king of hearts is a desperate card, and the swiftest in the pack. He took my queen, neat and clean, and he never gave her back. He never gave her back. He never gave her back. He never gave her back.
I'd like to talk about Broadside magazine a little bit more in more detail. It came out in the early '60s. In fact, they published Blowing in the Wind before anybody else, and they'd come out every 2 weeks with topical songs, protest songs, anti-war, etc., environmental songs. And when I was living in New York, I was right down the street from them. It was like a 15-minute walk. And so I had originally gone to their apartment to sing them the song I'd been told that I talked about before in 1967, which they really liked. And so they encouraged me, to write more songs. And every time I'd write one, I'd go up there and play it for them and record it. And a lot of them got into that magazine, which after a while came out once a month with, Pete Seeger, Tom Paxton, all the people I mentioned before, with their new songs. And in '76, Phil Oakes took his own life, and Sis called me right away, and she said, Phil had recently produced Sammy Walker's album. I don't know if you've heard Sammy Walker, great songwriter.
Sammy's a good friend, actually. I've interviewed Sammy many times. Yeah. And he's a friend. I know.
Lucky you. I mean, he's a really fantastic writer, and she compared him to Woody Guthrie, and he had Sis Cunningham from Broadside magazine, who ran it with her husband Gordon Friesen, and she said, Phil had promised that his next production would be me, because she had never put out an album. She had been part of the Almanac Singers. She was a wonderful musician. She transcribed all the songs for Broadside magazine, and she said, could you help me get this album together? And I said, well, I guess. And I went and bought a $3 cassette splicing, not cassette, but quarter-inch tape splicing machine. And I took her tapes that she had made, and she asked me to back her up on a couple more things that she was recording at home. And I did that, and I put it all together and became a record producer. And she was pleased enough with that she said, well, Phil Oakes had told us that we could put out any of the music that's on our tapes that he recorded as soon as he wrote the songs. We could put any of that out on Folkways, because they had a deal with Folkways. And she said he gave us permission, and he wrote it on a napkin. And, well, unfortunately, we lost the napkin, but we want to do it anyway. Would you do that for us? So they gave me their entire collection of tapes, which took up about 10 feet in my office. And I went through and listened to all the Phil Oakes songs and chronologically put them in order. And we put together Phil Oakes' The Broadside tapes, his very, very earliest songs, some of which were never and still have never been on records. And that came out. And also Phil Oakes Sings for Broadside came out, and I did an interview that he had done with them. I made an LP out of that. So 3 of those came out after Phil died. And then his brother intervened and said, you really can't put out any more of this because I'm the executor and you don't have my permission, basically. And so there's 2 others. Phil Oakes Broadside Tapes Volume 2 does not exist. And Folkways couldn't find it. Smithsonian can't find it. It only exists on my computer because I found the cassette of that and I put it on my computer. And I don't know what the heck to do with it. But it's very good because the volume 2 was chronological, so it was when he was developing more as a writer. But in the 80s, Sonny started doing the Phil Oakes nights, and the first was at Speakeasy in the Village where I recorded my album King of Hearts, and the second was at Folk City, and it was a rather stellar lineup. And and then she started taking that all over the world, or all over the East Coast anyway. And I was not part of that, but it was quite an honor with Melanie and Dave Van Ronk and Tom Paxton and Rod McDonald and all kinds of amazing singers doing Phil Oakes songs, Kim and Reggie and the Magpie, and they carried on that tradition. So I've known Sonny for since back then, and she's been a great supporter and just a fantastic person. So that's my Phil Oakes story, except that I did write an homage to Phil that's on this album, which I still sing, and really, it still moves me, because I think the first song I ever performed in public was I Ain't Marching Anymore, which really affected me and affected, a whole generation of people who realized they didn't want to go over to Vietnam.
So the song goes like this. Phil, what went wrong? Why are you quiet now? Phil, where's your song? I really need it now. You kept me warm throughout the storm, but now I feel a chill, Phil. I miss you. Phil, you were not mad, just fool enough to care. The love you always had, you always had to share. You never knew the good you did, and now you never will, Phil. I miss you. Phil, here's farewell. How I wish you could have stayed to help me understand, to make me unafraid. I dreamed I saw a golden bird outside my windowsill, Phil. I miss you. Thank you.
So what are you doing these days?
Well, I'm doing more performing. A lot of it is at adult facilities, where the people there are my peers at this point, and I do songs from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and sometimes my own songs, and they sing along. I have a song book that they can sing along with. I do performing in clubs, but it's not quite the way it used to be. And I'm not up and coming anymore, but I'm not down and going either. So I can still play and sing those songs. So if anybody wants me to come and sing in their town, I'm available.
Hey, Paul, thanks so much for being with me today. I'm so glad you decided to reissue this album. It's quite a good album. It really is. I had never heard of it until I got this thing. And I'm so impressed that, since the 80s, I missed it myself. And, I'm glad I have it now. King of Hearts is the name of the album. Paul Kaplan is the artist. And I'm so glad he decided to join with me today here on Mostly Folk. Paul, have a great afternoon, and I hope we get to meet up someday.
Same here, Artie. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, enjoy. Talk to you soon.
Indeed, yes.
In the storm, when winter is returning true to form, I will keep you warm. And you say you're insulated pretty tight, but the flickering of your candle has revealed you in a slightly different light. I will keep you warm. I'll keep the fire burning, keep you dry in the storm. When winter is returning true to form, I will keep you warm. I will hold you tightly as the wind attacks, and the summer of my kindness will protect you and fill up all the cracks. I will keep you warm. I'll